In the silent auction pen, she couldn't look away from the battered horse everyone despised for its short legs and raw injuries. She never expected that rescuing it would trigger threats and heartbreak beyond her control. At the far edge of a sprawling ranch, a small horse stood in the afternoon sun, her coat dull from neglect and her legs noticeably shorter than those of the others grazing nearby. She was easy to overlook, nothing like the sleek, long-limbed champions that pranced around the main paddock. Flies buzzed at her eyes, and her ragged ears flicked half-heartedly in a weak attempt at shooing them away. Passers-by would glance at her and immediately turn away, dismissing her as an oddity. She had old scars across her flanks, evidence of past injuries that never healed quite right. In a place where beauty and strength were prized above all, this horse might as well have been invisible. Yet there was something in her stance, an almost imperceptible pride, or perhaps a stubborn resilience, that suggested she was more than just a cast-off. Few people took the time to notice, and fewer still cared. Among the crowds visiting the ranch that day was a 14-year-old girl named Marisol, her braided hair swaying as she walked with determined steps across the dusty grounds. She had saved every spare cent from her chores, birthday money, and odd jobs around the neighborhood. Also, she could finally buy a horse she could call her own. Growing up, she had devoured stories about legendary mares and stallions, about the triumphant partnerships formed when rider and horse truly believed in each other. Marisol didn't need a champion to show off. She just wanted a friend, one whose eyes would light up when she entered the stable, one who might sense her heartbeat and trot over, excited to see her. That was her dream. But the tall, glossy horses with impeccable conformation all came with price tags that made her stomach drop. She had spent the morning drifting from pen to pen, approaching half a dozen horses that looked like they could come straight out of a magazine cover. None of them felt right. Each one tolerated her at best, but in their eyes she caught a glimpse of disinterest. She longed for a spark, an unmistakable sense of connection. Eventually, her wandering led her to the lonely paddock behind the barn, where the short-legged mare stood. At first, Marisol almost missed her entirely. The horse was standing still against the fence, her head lowered as if she had given up trying to be seen. In that quiet moment, though, something prompted Marisol to pause. Maybe it was the unusual color of the horse's coat, somewhere between faded chestnut and dusty brown, or the faint lines of old wounds crisscrossing her hindquarters. Perhaps it was the delicate way the mare's ears perked up when Marisol's footsteps drew near, as though the animal dared to hope for a gentle approach. With cautious steps, Marisol moved closer, her gaze warm and searching. She reached out a hand, letting it hover near the mare's muzzle without forcing contact. The horse flinched slightly, uncertain, before pressing her nostrils softly against Marisol's palm, exhaling in a timid sigh of curiosity. The connection was immediate. Marisol's heart fluttered. She sensed fear, but also a raw, unspoken desire for compassion. In that single breath, Marisol recognized a soul that wanted to trust, but had been given no reason to do so. She whispered softly, "Hey there, girl, I'm not here to hurt you." The mare's ears flicked, her eyes, dulled by countless rejections, reflected a sliver of longing. Marisol looked around, realizing no ranch hand or trainer was in sight. It was as if this short, scarred mare had been left off the official tour. She ran her hand slowly down the horse's neck, feeling the bumps of old injuries beneath her fingers. Her gaze fell on the mare's legs, short, stocky, nothing like the graceful limbs of the stable's prized mounts. But as she stood there, sharing that solitary space, Marisol could almost sense an untapped strength in those sturdy legs. She imagined the horse galloping across open fields, unconstrained by people's expectations. A gruff voice cut through her reverie. "What are you doing with that no-hope nag?" Startled, Marisol turned to see one of the ranch workers, arms folded, a condescending smile on his lips. "You really interested in her?" he asked, not bothering to hide his disbelief. Marisol squared her shoulders, determined not to let his attitude rattle her. "Is she for sale?" she asked, her voice steady. The ranch worker gave a short, disbelieving laugh. "Everything's for sale if you've got the money, but you don't want her, trust me. She's had leg problems since she was a foal, never ran well, and any time she tried, she ended up hobbling for days." The girl looked down at the horse, still pressing gently into her palm. Then she raised her chin, meeting the man's gaze. "I'd still like to know how much," she repeated softly. The worker rolled his eyes. "She won't cost much, that's for sure." "Talk to Mr. Alvarez inside the barn office?" Marisol's stomach twisted. She knew she didn't have a lot of money, but something about this horse called to her. There was a kinship in their shared underestimation, a sense that each had more to offer than the world believed. Nodding her thanks, she took one last lingering look at the mare before marching toward the barn. The office was tucked away behind a stack of dusty old saddles. Mr. Alvarez was a middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair. He wore an air of distant politeness, as though anticipating yet another fruitless inquiry. "You're interested in that little mare?" he repeated when Marisol inquired, eyeing her skeptically. She nodded. "Yes, sir, I'd like to buy her. I know she's injured and her legs are, well, unusual, but I want to take care of her." Alvarez leaned back in his creaky chair, glancing at the battered file on his desk. "Her name's Caramel," he said slowly. "She's about 5, but she's had a rough life. She was bred for short-track speed on a small local circuit, but her legs never developed right, and then she got banged up. Her owners left her here, said it wasn't worth trying to fix her." He sighed. "You sure you want that kind of responsibility?" Marisol took a breath. "I'm sure." She counted out her savings in front of him, enough for a down payment and maybe a bit more for feed. With a mild shake of his head, Alvarez took the money. He appeared both bemused and relieved, as if he was happy to see someone care but unconvinced of a favorable outcome. After signing a few forms, Marisol clutched the papers that made Caramel hers. Her cheeks felt warm with excitement. She had never owned a horse before, and now she was about to walk away with the one everyone insisted was worthless. Outside, the ranch worker from before watched her lead Caramel with a mixture of pity and scorn. He mumbled something about the horse being a burden, but Marisol tuned him out. Instead, she focused on Caramel's slow, uneven gait. Each step seemed a little surer than the last, as though the mare sensed something had changed. They made the trip to Marisol's modest family property in the bed of a borrowed trailer. Caramel trembled through the ride, and Marisol stayed beside her, offering whispered reassurances. She couldn't ignore how the horse flinched at every bump. The trust between them was fragile, a delicate thread Marisol vowed to safeguard at all costs. When they finally arrived, the sun was close to setting. A modest wooden stable stood near a wide, overgrown field. Marisol's parents, though hesitant about her decision, had helped her clear out a stall with fresh straw. They greeted Caramel quietly, sending Marisol sympathetic but supportive smiles. That evening, as Caramel stepped onto the soft straw of her new home, Marisol felt a surge of responsibility unlike anything she'd experienced. She gently massaged the horse's front legs, noticing swelling and old wounds. She brushed the tangles from Caramel's mane, revealing a patchy thickness where hair had grown back in odd directions. The entire time, Caramel watched her with cautious eyes. Over the next few days, Marisol's life revolved around caring for Caramel. Before dawn, she would hobble out to the stable, yawning but full of resolve. She cleaned the stall meticulously, preparing special feed with supplements to help Caramel's joints. By afternoon, she practiced short walks in the field, never pushing the mare beyond a gentle stroll. Caramel's injuries were tricky. Some days were better than others, and on the bad days, she could barely put weight on her front leg without wincing. Marisol learned to read the horse's posture, noticing subtle cues, a flick of the ear, a raised tail that signaled discomfort. She consulted books on equine therapy from the local library, tried herbal balms, and made sure Caramel had a soft place to rest. Each evening brought tiny milestones, a more relaxed stance, a small show of eagerness when Marisol approached with treats, even the flicker of curiosity if she left the stable door ajar. Despite this progress, whispers began circulating in the neighborhood. People saw the short, limping mare and shook their heads. Neighbors would mumble about how foolish it was to sink money and effort into a lost cause. Still, Marisol pressed on. She believed in Caramel because she sensed, beneath the horse's wariness, an untapped resilience. One late afternoon, while gently hosing down Caramel's legs, Marisol felt the horse lean into the cool water. The tension in her shoulders seemed to melt. As though she finally trusted this soothing ritual, Marisol spoke softly. "You'll see. You're going to be strong again." She didn't know if Caramel understood the words, but she hoped the warmth in her voice carried the message. The real turning point came a week later, when Marisol decided to remove Caramel's old wraps and assess the injuries more closely. She discovered infection beneath one of the scars, a stubborn pocket of heat that caused Caramel to stamp in pain when touched. Alarmed, Marisol rushed inside to tell her parents. They called the local veterinarian, who arrived just before nightfall. The vet, Dr. Salinas, was gentle but direct. "She's in worse shape than I thought," he explained after cleaning and dressing the wound. "You'll need to be patient. It could be weeks before she can handle a full load on that leg, maybe months." Marisol swallowed hard. "But she will heal, right?" she pressed, her voice quivering with worry. Dr. Salinas gave a measured nod. "With the right care and a lot of rest, she has a chance. Don't expect miracles overnight." After the vet left, Marisol crumpled onto a hay bale beside Caramel's stall. For the first time, she let her tears fall, worried that she'd taken on more than she could handle. But as she looked over at Caramel, lying quietly in the straw, breathing slow and steady, a wave of determination washed over her. Maybe Caramel's legs would never be perfect, but if there was any chance of giving her a real future, Marisol had to try. Drawing a shaky breath, she rose, fetched a brush, and returned to the stall. She stroked Caramel's mane in gentle, repetitive motions, letting the rhythm calm her racing thoughts. In that silent barn, lit only by a single overhead bulb, Marisol promised that she would do whatever it took to help the mare stand proudly once more. She didn't realize it yet, but the first steps of their remarkable journey had just been taken. In the days that followed Dr. Salinas's visit, Marisol devoted herself completely to Caramel's care. Before dawn, she would shuffle out to the stable, carrying a lantern in one hand and a small bag of feed in the other. The morning air was cold enough to make her breath swirl in pale clouds, but she never let the chill deter her. She started each day by cleaning Caramel's stall, clearing soiled straw and laying down fresh bedding that would be gentler on the mare's injured legs. Then she checked the bandages that Dr. Salinas had applied, carefully unwrapping them to ensure there was no fresh swelling or sign of infection. Caramel would watch her with those dark, wary eyes, still unsure if this sudden kindness was real or a passing illusion. Marisol tried not to think about how many times this horse must have tasted disappointment before. Balancing school and horse care proved challenging, but Marisol organized her schedule with single-minded focus. As soon as she got home in the afternoons, she dropped her backpack by the front door, grabbed a snack, and raced out to the stable again. Caramel grew more at ease with the routine. The horse would nicker softly at the sound of Marisol's footsteps, though she still stood tentatively as the girl approached with a halter or brush. Sometimes, Marisol would bring in a stool so she could sit beside Caramel, reading aloud from horse care manuals and adventure novels. The act soothed both of them. Whenever Caramel's ears pricked at an interesting sentence, Marisol couldn't help smiling. Despite the small improvements, the mare's overall progress remained slow. On good days, Caramel could manage a few careful steps around the yard without wincing. On the difficult days, her leg trembled so badly that Marisol had to coax her back into the stall and wrap the limb in cool compresses. Each setback triggered new waves of doubt in Marisol's heart. Late at night, she'd catch herself replaying her decision to buy Caramel, wondering if she was foolish to believe she could heal the horse when others, presumably more experienced, had given up. Still, every morning, she woke with renewed determination. Giving up was never an option. One brisk Sunday, she managed to persuade her father to help fashion a small paddock behind the stable where Caramel could safely roam. They worked side by side, hammering wooden posts into the ground and stretching wire mesh between them. It wasn't elegant, but it would provide a contained space for Caramel to explore without straining herself on uneven terrain. By the time the paddock stood finished, Marisol was sweating through her sweatshirt, and her father was wiping his brow with a worn handkerchief. They both looked at Caramel, who had been watching from the stable door. A pang of hope fluttered in Marisol's chest. Maybe this small enclosure could be the start of something bigger. The very next day, Marisol coaxed Caramel into the paddock for the first time. With the gate latched behind them, she unhooked the lead rope and stepped back to let the mare investigate. At first, Caramel remained rooted near the entrance, nostrils flaring with apprehension. She lifted her head, gazing around as though expecting someone to appear and chase her off. Marisol stayed perfectly still, her heart pounding in anticipation. Slowly, Caramel shuffled forward, sniffing at the ground. After a few tentative steps, she lowered her head to nibble on the sparse grass. Marisol released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. It was a small moment, but it felt like a momentous achievement. Neighbors who passed by would occasionally pause, curious about the short-legged horse limping around in Marisol's yard. Sometimes they offered a polite greeting, other times they just shook their heads, certain the girl was wasting her time on a creature that would never become anything noteworthy. Marisol tried not to let their attitudes get to her, yet she couldn't help noticing how often people assumed Caramel was beyond saving. Determined to silence those doubts, Marisol immersed herself in research. She borrowed every veterinary guide and equine therapy book she could find from the local library. She scoured online forums, where horse enthusiasts traded tips on rehabbing injuries. If there was a grain of knowledge that might help Caramel, she wanted it. It was through one of these online communities that Marisol learned about an equine physiotherapist named Mariam, who sometimes traveled to small farms to offer advice. Mariam specialized in gentle rehabilitation exercises for horses with chronic injuries. Though it felt like a long shot, Marisol emailed Mariam's office, describing Caramel's condition in heartfelt detail. She asked if there was any possibility Mariam could stop by. Days passed without a response, until one afternoon an email arrived. Mariam would be in the region next month and could spare a visit. Marisol's excitement soared. She printed the email and tucked it into her notebook, as a reminder that help was on the horizon. Meanwhile, her parents watched her efforts with hesitant pride. They'd been supportive from the start, but they also worried about her getting hurt or disappointed. One evening, her mother gently said, "You know, honey, if it gets to be too much, we can talk about finding a better equipped place for Caramel." The very idea made Marisol's chest tighten. She shook her head firmly. "She's my responsibility. I'll keep trying," she insisted. Her mother sighed but gave her a soft smile. "All right, just remember, we're here if you need us." True to her word, Marisol persevered. Each day, Caramel's trust in her grew. The horse would now let Marisol run her hands along her spine, checking for sore spots. The scruffy mane began to show signs of renewed shine, thanks to Marisol's careful grooming and nutritional supplements. Dr. Salinas returned for another checkup, seeming pleasantly surprised. "Whatever you're doing, keep it up," he said, patting Caramel's neck. "She's nowhere near fit for serious riding, but she's better than she was." Marisol treasured every bit of positive feedback, no matter how small. Then came the day Caramel actually trotted, if only for a few hesitant strides. It happened by accident. Marisol had unlatched the paddock gate to bring in fresh water when an unexpected clap of thunder rumbled across the sky, startling the mare. Instead of freezing, Caramel broke into a short, uneven trot toward the far corner of the enclosure. Though it lasted just seconds, Marisol stood transfixed by the sight of Caramel moving faster than a walk without collapsing in pain. When Caramel came to a stop, sides heaving, Marisol hurried over, speaking in soothing tones. She ran her hands down the mare's legs, checking for signs of strain. To her relief, Caramel seemed no worse for wear, just shaken by the sudden noise. That evening, Marisol recounted the incident to her mother, describing every detail from the anxious flick of Caramel's ears to the moment she slowed to a halt. She couldn't stop smiling. "She trotted," Marisol repeated, as though it were the most astonishing miracle, and to her it was. It hinted at potential, a sign that maybe the injuries didn't define Caramel's entire future. She caught herself fantasizing about a time when Caramel might one day canter freely, short legs and all, without wincing in pain. As the weeks passed, Mariam's visit loomed closer. Marisol counted down the days on a small calendar pinned to the stable wall. She meticulously recorded Caramel's daily progress, noting things like how many steps she took in the paddock or how her appetite had improved. She even wrote down Caramel's moods, whether she seemed relaxed, anxious, or spirited. Thinking it might help the physiotherapist gauge the mare's mental state, she wanted to be ready with as much information as possible. Some nights, though, doubt still gnawed at her. What if Mariam took one look at Caramel and declared she'd never walk properly again, let alone run? Marisol tried to brace herself for that possibility, but the more she bonded with Caramel, the more she refused to entertain thoughts of giving up. Finally, the day arrived. Mariam, a petite woman with kind eyes and sun-kissed skin, parked her dusty SUV in the yard. She stepped out wearing sturdy boots and carrying a well-worn bag of supplies. Marisol greeted her eagerly, introducing herself and then leading Mariam straight to where Caramel stood in the paddock. After a brief exchange of pleasantries, Mariam focused on the mare. She spent several minutes simply observing Caramel's stance, the angle of her hind legs, the tension along her back. Then she asked Marisol to walk the horse slowly so she could see the gait in motion. As Caramel limped forward, Mariam's brow furrowed thoughtfully. She motioned for Marisol to pause, then gently ran her palms along Caramel's muscles, checking for tightness or twitching. The horse flinched at first, but Mariam's touch was practiced and delicate. Little by little, Caramel relaxed beneath her scrutiny. When Mariam finally looked up, Marisol's stomach twisted with anxiety, afraid of what she might say. Mariam offered a reassuring smile. "She's got significant scarring and some structural challenges," she began. "But I've seen far worse cases come back to comfortable movement, sometimes even light riding. This will take time, though, months, maybe a year or more. If you're willing to be patient, there's a lot we can do." Relief crashed over Marisol in a wave. She nodded vigorously. "I'm willing," she said, almost laughing with a mix of nerves and elation. Mariam chuckled at her enthusiasm. "Good. Let's start with gentle stretching exercises. We'll also work on building muscle around those injured joints so they can support her better." She demonstrated a few techniques, carefully instructing Marisol on how to lift each leg, rotate it, and release it without causing distress. Caramel fussed a bit at the unfamiliar manipulations, but seemed to settle once she realized there was no immediate pain. For the rest of that afternoon, Mariam guided Marisol through a routine that involved slow, deliberate walks and posture adjustments. She also suggested massage therapy, using mild pressure to ease tension. "Another key is mental stimulation," Mariam explained. "Injured horses can become depressed if they're confined or constantly in pain. Introduce toys or safe objects she can nudge around. Give her variety in her daily environment." Marisol took mental notes of every word. By the time Mariam left, the sun was dipping low, painting the sky with ribbons of pink and orange. Marisol felt renewed confidence as she watched Caramel doze in the paddock. In the days after, she faithfully followed Mariam's advice. She carved out time before and after school to run Caramel through the stretches and gentle movement drills. She set up a small obstacle course of cones so Caramel could weave between them at a slow pace, stimulating both her mind and her legs. She even hung a sturdy rubber ball from a rope just inside the paddock, hoping the mare might find some interest in nudging it around. Though Caramel eyed it with suspicion at first, Marisol was certain the novelty would help keep her spirits up. Progress was gradual, painstakingly so. Still, Caramel's endurance improved in nearly imperceptible increments. One morning, Marisol caught the mare exploring the paddock without prodding, nosing at the rubber ball as though testing its worthiness. The sight made Marisol's heart lift. After months of fear and hesitation, Caramel was beginning to accept that this world might be safe for her. Maybe there was more to life than pain and limitations. Marisol herself felt changed by this journey. She was learning about patience on a scale she had never imagined, discovering that real healing isn't a simple trajectory of linear progress. There were backslides and moments when Caramel's leg would flare up, forcing them both to scale back their exercises. Yet each time, they bounced back a little more confident than before. In stolen moments, usually late at night, Marisol would imagine a future where Caramel, scars and short legs notwithstanding, could do more than merely shuffle or limp. She saw visions of the mare stepping forward proudly, defying the doubts of the onlookers who once dismissed her as useless. Even if they never trotted in a show ring or raced across an arena, the mere possibility of Caramel finding her own version of strength kept Marisol moving forward. For the first time since Caramel arrived, Marisol woke up feeling like she had a glimpse of what might be possible if everything went right. The previous day's successes, the slow, steady exercises with Mariam's guidance, had given her a sense of direction. She could still recall the feeling of Caramel's muscles relaxing under her hands, the small victories that felt monumental against the backdrop of so many doubts. But as she pulled on her jacket and headed to the stable at daybreak, Marisol reminded herself that progress wasn't guaranteed. The air held a crisp chill, and patches of dew glistened on the grass in the early sunlight. She found Caramel dozing in the far corner of the paddock, ears twitching at the soft rustle of Marisol's footsteps. When she called the mare's name in a quiet, sing-song voice, Caramel's head lifted, eyes reflecting a cautious recognition. In that simple motion, Marisol could see that the horse was beginning, just beginning, to trust. As part of the rehabilitation routine, Marisol started with gentle stretches. She had memorized each movement Mariam demonstrated, from lifting Caramel's front leg carefully, rotating it to loosen the stiff joint, then supporting it for a few seconds before allowing the hoof to touch the ground again. Caramel tensed at first, but soon relaxed, her stance less rigid than it had been in those early weeks. Next came the short walk around the paddock, which Marisol timed with a stopwatch so she could track improvements from day to day. Caramel ambled at a slow, uneven pace, her legs clearly taking a cautious measure of each step, yet the slivers of pain that once clouded her eyes seemed to fade, replaced by a tentative resilience. Each lap around the makeshift enclosure felt like a small triumph, adding another layer to the bond between horse and girl. When the morning exercises were complete, Marisol gathered her school books and hurried to catch the bus. All through her classes, she found her mind wandering back to Caramel. She'd tap her pencil on the edge of her desk, thinking about which new technique she might try in the afternoon and whether the mare would continue showing progress or retreat in fear. Sometimes she worried that she was ignoring her own life outside of Caramel's world, but then she'd remember how Caramel's eyes lit up for those few precious seconds each morning. That spark made all the extra effort worthwhile. By the last bell, Marisol was practically sprinting home, her thoughts already on the stable and whatever new improvements might await her there. That afternoon, the paddock was bathed in soft light when Marisol stepped inside with Caramel's halter. She noticed something that sent a jolt of excitement through her. Caramel seemed alert, almost eager, as though she anticipated the session instead of dreading it. With careful hands, Marisol clipped on the halter, then led the mare across the paddock. There was still a slight limp, but Caramel's stride felt steadier under Marisol's guiding touch. Marisol rewarded the horse with a gentle pat and soft words of praise. These were the moments that chased away the insecurities and hush-hush remarks of the people who believed Caramel was a waste of time. A distant sound of approaching hooves interrupted the quiet. Marisol looked up to see a lanky teenage boy riding a tall bay horse along the outer fence. She recognized him as Thomas, a neighbor's son who often practiced barrel racing in the open fields. His horse's coat glistened in the sun, every muscle clearly defined and built for speed. Thomas slowed to a trot near the fence. "Hey, Marisol," he called, voice echoing over the enclosure. She raised her hand in greeting, though she felt a little self-conscious about Caramel's hobbling gait. Thomas dismounted, letting his own horse graze at the edge of the property. "I've heard you've been working miracles with that mare," he teased, but his tone was more curious than mocking. "How's she doing?" Marisol tried to smile. "She's getting better, slowly," she said, gently scratching Caramel behind the ear. "We've got a long road, but I think she's happy." Thomas nodded, walking around the fence to get a closer look. Caramel's ears flicked nervously at the presence of a stranger, but she remained by Marisol's side. "She certainly seems calmer than the last time I saw her," Thomas said. He reached out carefully, offering his hand for Caramel to sniff. After a moment's hesitation, the mare brushed her muzzle against his palm. Marisol felt an odd swell of pride at Caramel's boldness. Just weeks earlier, the horse would have shied away or fled. Thomas lingered, asking questions about Caramel's therapy. Marisol found herself opening up about all the exercises they were doing, the gentle leg stretches, the obstacle course with cones, the massage techniques for tight muscles. She explained how Mariam had shown her specific ways to support Caramel's joints and build trust. Thomas listened intently, occasionally glancing back at his own horse. He confessed he'd never worked with a horse that was considered a reject, and seeing Caramel's slow but steady progress challenged a lot of his assumptions. "I guess I always thought if a horse wasn't immediately performing, it was best to move on," he admitted, shrugging. "But I can see how much heart she's got. Maybe there's more to it than just raw ability." Those words stirred something in Marisol. In the corner of her mind, she recalled the cynics who had mocked her for buying Caramel. Yet here was Thomas, someone used to training horses for competition, recognizing the mare's hidden worth. It reinforced Marisol's determination to keep pushing forward. By the time Thomas rode off, day was edging into late afternoon. Marisol slipped off Caramel's halter and let her roam free in the paddock. She stood back, arms folded over the top rail, observing the horse as she explored the corners of the enclosure. Even if Caramel could never perform at a high level, simply seeing her content in this space felt like a victory. A few days later, Mariam returned for another session. This time, she brought along some specialized therapy bands and a small, lightweight training surcingle that could help Caramel rebuild core strength without the weight of a saddle. Marisol watched closely, nodding along as Mariam explained how the bands, placed around Caramel's hindquarters, could encourage the horse to engage muscles that had atrophied. Caramel, unsettled by the new sensation, pranced stiffly at first. Mariam's calm patience eventually convinced her that the strange contraptions weren't a threat. Inch by inch, Caramel adapted. When they finished the session, Mariam offered a quiet smile. "She's making good strides. Not fast, but consistent. Keep this up, and I think you'll see even bigger improvements in a month or two." The therapist paused, glancing at Marisol with something akin to admiration. "You know, not everyone would dedicate this much time to a horse with such a rocky past, but it really seems like she's thriving under your care." Marisol felt her cheeks grow warm. She was proud, yet she also understood the precariousness of the situation. One setback, one serious flare of Caramel's injury, and they might lose all these gains. But that was a risk she'd already accepted. As the weeks slipped by, small milestones accumulated. Caramel allowed a bit of weight on her back, in the form of a soft blanket that Marisol used to acclimate her to the idea of carrying something again. The mare still flinched if Marisol moved too quickly or if a loud noise echoed across the yard, but each moment of tension was shorter-lived than the one before. Marisol also discovered that Caramel had a playful streak. Now that her legs hurt less, she'd swat at the hanging rubber ball, pushing it so it swung wildly. Marisol laughed aloud the first time she saw the mare batting at the toy, ears forward with a mischievous glint in her eye. She took it as a sign that Caramel's spirit was reviving bit by bit. One evening, after completing Caramel's exercises, Marisol's mother invited her into the house for dinner. Over plates of steaming rice and vegetables, they discussed the mare's future. "Are you planning to try and ride her one day?" her mother asked gently, not wanting to press too hard. Marisol hesitated, carefully chewing before speaking. "I'd like to, eventually," she admitted, "but only if her legs are strong enough. I'm not in a rush." Her father nodded approvingly. "Patience is key," he said, echoing the phrase she'd heard so often from Mariam and Dr. Salinas. That night, Marisol felt a warm sense of unity in her family's support, a comforting reassurance that they believed in her mission. Despite her hopeful outlook, each new step came with challenges. On a drizzly afternoon, Marisol tried leading Caramel around the paddock at a slightly faster pace to see if the mare's trot was improving. At first, Caramel moved smoothly, but then she stumbled, letting out a shrill squeal of discomfort. Heart pounding, Marisol rushed to steady her, carefully checking the injured leg for any new signs of damage. In the end, Caramel seemed more startled than severely hurt, but the scare lingered. Marisol cried quietly in her room that evening, frustrated with herself for pushing too soon. However, the next day Caramel's limp had not worsened, giving Marisol a sliver of relief. The mare had simply needed more time to adjust. News of Caramel's improving condition began to spread. A few local equestrians who had once scoffed at the mare now found themselves intrigued by her progress. One older woman who ran a small riding school approached Marisol at a local tack shop, asking if she might bring some of her students by to observe Caramel's therapeutic routine. "It could teach them about compassion," the woman said. Marisol's heart pounded with mixed excitement and nervousness. She wanted to share Caramel's story, but she also worried about putting the horse on display as a spectacle for pity. Eventually, she agreed, deciding that if her efforts could inspire even one young rider to think differently about horses with limitations, it was worth the risk. True to her word, the riding school group arrived one weekend morning, a handful of kids not much younger than Marisol chattering as they gathered around the paddock fence. Caramel eyed the crowd from a safe distance, shifting anxiously. Marisol explained Caramel's background in simple terms, how she had been overlooked, how she'd faced multiple injuries, and how they were now working on building trust and strength. She demonstrated one of the gentle stretching exercises, placing a hand on Caramel's flank and guiding the leg forward, then back, all while keeping her voice low and reassuring. The children watched, rapt. One girl with bright pink riding boots spoke up. "Does she still hurt?" she asked, her gaze flicking to the horse's bandaged leg. Marisol answered honestly, "She does sometimes, but it's less than before. We help her heal by going slow and never forcing her to do more than she's ready for." The group stayed for nearly an hour. Several of the kids petted Caramel, offering gentle scratches on her neck while murmuring soft words of encouragement. Though Caramel stayed tense, she didn't bolt or try to hide. Marisol recognized this as another milestone, an ability to endure the presence of multiple strangers without panicking. When the riding school kids left, many waved goodbye, promising to check in on Caramel again. Marisol felt a flicker of pride. Caramel, once dismissed as worthless, was now teaching others about patience and empathy. After the visitors were gone, Marisol stayed in the paddock, running a brush down Caramel's coat. She found herself whispering, "You're pretty special, you know." And though she doubted Caramel understood the words, the horse leaned into the brush, a tiny sign of contentment. In that quiet moment, Marisol allowed herself to imagine a future that might once have seemed impossible. Caramel, no longer shackled by the memory of old injuries, carrying herself with confidence in a small local show, or even just on a leisurely ride through the countryside. If that day never came, so be it. Marisol had learned that the real victory was in giving Caramel a life free from fear and abandonment. Still, she held on to the dream, using it to fuel her unwavering commitment to the mare's recovery. The following week brought clearer skies and a sense that summer was inching closer. Marisol increased the daily walks by a minute or two, carefully watching Caramel's body language for any sign of pain. Each time Caramel finished without limping, Marisol's hopes soared. She vowed not to let overconfidence push them too far, too soon. If anything, she was learning more about the delicate balance between ambition and caution. The strong-willed girl who had once assumed she could fix Caramel overnight was beginning to understand that true healing was a journey, as much about emotional trust as physical strength, and Caramel, short legs and all, seemed more than willing to take those steps, one careful stride at a time. As summer steadily approached, long hours of daylight gave Marisol more opportunities to work with Caramel. Every morning, she woke to the soft pink glow of the rising sun, her mind already abuzz with plans for the day's exercises. Though her friends teased her about dedicating so much time to a horse she couldn't even ride yet, Marisol's resolve never wavered. In the weeks since Mariam introduced new therapy methods, Caramel's limp had eased to the point where, on some days, it was scarcely noticeable. Marisol documented each session meticulously, noting slight improvements in stride length or the angle at which the mare held her head. She felt like a detective piecing together a puzzle, determined to discover the exact combination of patience and practice that would unlock Caramel's full potential. On a bright Tuesday afternoon, Mariam returned to conduct a more thorough evaluation. Standing in the paddock, the therapist asked Marisol to walk Caramel in a circle. The mare stepped out with caution, ears flicking at unfamiliar sounds, but her posture looked far more balanced than it once had. Mariam nodded in approval. "Her range of motion is improving," she remarked. "She still favors that leg, but it's stronger than before." "Keep going. No sudden leaps in effort. Slow and steady remains the key." Marisol beamed, proud that all the hours of gentle stretching, massage, and structured walks had paid off. She'd spent countless evenings icing Caramel's leg or applying warm compresses, adjusting her routine based on the horse's mood and condition. It felt good to see tangible results. With Mariam's blessing, Marisol introduced a new exercise regimen that involved weaving between cones spaced around the paddock. At first, Caramel moved hesitantly, ears pinned back in uncertainty. But Marisol guided her with a light touch and calm voice, shaping the mare's path so each turn was gentle and purposeful. Over time, Caramel caught on, and the sessions turned into a game of sorts, a daily test of mental alertness as much as physical ability. "You're a smart girl," Marisol whispered each time Caramel successfully navigated a new pattern. She found that Caramel responded best when spoken to softly. Maybe it reminded her of being soothed after past injuries, or maybe she was simply attuned to Marisol's calm energy. On weekends, Tomas sometimes dropped by after his own training sessions, leaning over the fence to watch the pair at work. He had begun to ask more nuanced questions, revealing a genuine curiosity about Caramel's recovery. "Do you ever think about putting her into a small competition, just to see how she does?" he asked one Saturday. Marisol frowned thoughtfully. "I don't want to push her too quickly, but maybe, once she's stronger, a local show could be a confidence boost." Thomas nodded, adjusting his hat. "I get it. Better to go slow than risk a setback." He offered a wry grin and continued, "But I'll tell you this, every time I see her, she looks more like a horse with something to prove." Word of Caramel's gradual transformation began to spread beyond the immediate neighborhood. One afternoon, Marisol and her mother visited the local feed store, where the owner, Mr. Ortega, remarked that he'd heard talk of that girl who's reviving a horse nobody wanted. Marisol flushed with a mixture of pride and embarrassment. She had never set out to gain attention, but the more people who saw Caramel's progress, the more she hoped they'd learn not to dismiss horses or anyone based on initial appearances. Mr. Ortega stocked the supplements she used, and he occasionally threw in a small discount, commenting that the mare's story was good for the community. Marisol thanked him, inwardly marveling at how her quiet dedication was impacting others. Meanwhile, a few challenges still lingered. Caramel's discomfort sometimes flared when the weather turned damp. On those days, Marisol could see tension in the mare's gait, and the horse would favor her leg more noticeably. Although it was disheartening, Mariam had warned Marisol that setbacks were inevitable. Keeping Caramel's leg warm, reducing her exercise just a notch, and doubling down on gentle massage usually alleviated the stiffness after a day or two. Marisol tried not to let these relapses shake her faith in the bigger picture. Each time, she'd whisper, "It's okay, girl. We'll slow down until you're ready again." And Caramel would look at her with an almost apologetic air, as though the mare hated disappointing her young caretaker. Marisol's parents remained a steady source of support, even if they didn't always grasp the finer points of equine therapy. Her mother would often appear at the paddock fence with a glass of lemonade, reminding Marisol to stay hydrated in the sweltering afternoon heat. Her father helped reinforce parts of the fence, replaced worn boards in the stable, and sometimes accompanied Mariam during therapy sessions to learn how to spot potential hazards in Caramel's movements. It was a quiet, understated solidarity that Marisol appreciated more than she could express. Sometimes, after tucking Caramel in for the night, she found herself hugging her father in the stable aisle, murmuring thanks as the old overhead bulb cast a soft glow on their little world. With the encouragement of Mariam and Thomas, Marisol started to consider entering Caramel in a small local showcase, something designed not for high-level competition, but as a casual way to present rehabilitated horses and share training tips. Rumors of such an event floated around feed stores and local bulletin boards, and Marisol investigated further. The event, scheduled for late summer, was primarily a demonstration for riders and trainers who specialized in rescue or therapy. While there would be no official trophies, it offered a chance to display progress and network with others facing similar challenges. At first, Marisol hesitated. She didn't want to stress Caramel with transport or new surroundings, yet she also sensed that being around similarly rehabilitated horses might be inspiring for them both. She brought the idea up with Mariam, who raised an interested eyebrow. A demonstration event, not a competitive show, sounds like a wonderful opportunity, the therapist agreed. Caramel wouldn't be pushed to outperform anyone. It'd be more like telling her story while letting her move around the ring. You'll need to gauge how she handles new environments, though. Marisol nodded, her excitement tempered by practicality. The next major step would be introducing Caramel to situations that felt unfamiliar. Music over loudspeakers, the buzz of conversation, the sight of other horses in close proximity. All of that might trigger the mare's anxieties. Determined to prepare, Marisol set up small challenges at home. She borrowed a portable radio from her father and played soft music near the paddock, gradually increasing the volume so Caramel could get used to background noise. She also draped colored tarps along the fence and scattered bright cones. At first, Caramel spooked at the flapping tarps, nostrils flaring as she backed away. Marisol clucked her tongue soothingly, standing between Caramel and the objects, letting the mare see that nothing would harm her. Day by day, Caramel eased her apprehension. By the end of the second week, she'd walk past the tarps with only a mild flick of an ear. When that started going well, Marisol arranged for Thomas to bring his bay horse, Rio, over to practice side by side. She believed that letting Caramel work near another horse, one that was calm and well-trained, might ease the shock of a busier environment. The first session was tense. Caramel paced anxiously, eyes wide at Rio's large frame towering nearby. However, Rio was gentle and patient, a perfect partner for the exercise. He lowered his head, sniffing curiously in Caramel's direction without making any sudden moves. Gradually, the mare seemed to accept his presence, and they walked the enclosure in a tandem that felt almost surreal to Marisol. "Look at her," Thomas murmured, impressed. "She's come a long way from that stiff, limping horse you brought home." In the weeks leading to the event, Mariam visited more frequently, fine-tuning Caramel's therapy. Marisol continued stretching sessions in the morning and short trot intervals in the late afternoon, ensuring that the mare gained stamina without overexertion. She also introduced a soft training bridle, letting Caramel grow accustomed to the feel of gentle pressure on her face, though Marisol still had no intention of fully riding her anytime soon. For Marisol, it was less about teaching Caramel advanced maneuvers and more about building confidence. She'd walk the mare around the yard, occasionally leading her right up to the front porch, where she'd fetch a carrot treat from inside the house. Caramel would stand quietly, ears perked, gazing in through the open door as if taking in the domestic scene with mild curiosity. Finally, the day of the demonstration arrived. Waking before dawn, Marisol felt equal parts excitement and nerves. She stepped into the stable, heart pounding, and found Caramel awake, swishing her tail as though sensing that something was different. Marisol whispered, "Ready for a big adventure." She carefully loaded the mare into her father's borrowed trailer, layering extra padding on the floors and walls. Caramel hesitated at the ramp, but after a few moments, she took a deep breath, nostrils quivering, and stepped inside. It was her first time traveling since she'd come home to Marisol, and the gravity of that moment made Marisol's pulse quicken. The drive to the fairgrounds took about an hour, each bump in the road sending a jolt of anxiety through Marisol's thoughts. She kept peeking into the small side window, checking on Caramel, who stood braced and wide-eyed. At last, they arrived. Tents and small rings had been set up across a wide field, and various horses milled about, some with clear signs of past neglect, ribs showing, dull coats, uneasy steps. Others looked nearly recovered, trotting with a new vigor that hinted at countless hours of patience and care. Marisol felt a surge of solidarity just seeing them. As her father parked, she tried to center herself. This wasn't a contest. It was a chance to show that Caramel wasn't defined by her short legs or her injuries. She led Caramel out of the trailer slowly, allowing the mare to take in the unfamiliar surroundings. Caramel's hooves slid a little on the ramp, but she emerged with ears pricked, eyes darting from side to side. The sounds of distant chatter, whinnies, and occasional loudspeaker announcements floated on the early morning breeze. Mariam appeared from around a tent, waving them over to an area cordoned off for presentations. "Don't worry if she's jumpy," the therapist reassured Marisol. "All these new sights and sounds can be overwhelming." Marisol nodded, feeling the nerves coil in her stomach. They found a quiet corner where Caramel could settle, while Marisol double-checked the mare's legs. Though tense, Caramel was not trembling the way she once might have. In that small sign of composure, Marisol took courage. She reminded herself that whether Caramel managed to walk calmly around the ring or balked at the crowd, their real success was the journey that brought them here at all. After some time, an announcer's voice crackled over the loudspeaker, calling for participants to gather near the demonstration ring. Heart hammering, Marisol walked Caramel slowly past the rows of curious onlookers and into the enclosure, which was enclosed by simple fencing. Inside, a small cluster of riders and handlers began sharing their stories. One by one, they brought out horses with scars and histories of abandonment, describing how each had made it through adversity. When it was Marisol's turn, her voice wavered at first, but she found her confidence as she introduced Caramel, explaining the mare's short legs, injuries, and the uphill battle of her recovery. She mentioned Mariam's guidance and her own family's support. Then she slowly guided Caramel into a gentle walk around the perimeter, demonstrating the therapy stretches and turns. The crowd remained hushed, not with disinterest, but with something akin to reverence for the sight of a horse once deemed hopeless, now walking with such focus. Caramel's gait wasn't perfect. There was a slight irregularity to her steps, but she never limped or stumbled. When she finished the small circle, Marisol noticed tears glistening in the eyes of one woman leaning on the fence. Applause broke out, subdued yet heartfelt. Caramel's ears flicked at the sound, But she didn't shy away. Marisol allowed herself a small, trembling smile. They had done it. Maybe it wasn't a blue ribbon or a standing ovation, but it was real, unvarnished validation of every early morning, every tearful setback, every spark of hope that had guided them. After the applause subsided, Marisol allowed herself a moment of quiet pride. Caramel stood at her side, breathing steadily despite the curious stares around them. Participants in the demonstration drifted forward, offering congratulations. One woman, who had shared her own tale of a rescued thoroughbred, patted Caramel's shoulder and remarked how her resilience shone through every hesitant step. Marisol felt her heart swell with gratitude. As the announcer brought attention to the next participant, Marisol guided Caramel away from the ring. She found a modest corner under a tree where the mare could rest, nibbling grass while people came over to chat. Some asked about Caramel's exercises, while others simply expressed admiration. Marisol was unaccustomed to such interest, but she recognized how each conversation validated her tireless dedication and faith. Mariam soon approached, a warm smile on her face. "You two did wonderfully," she said. "Even with the crowd and noise, Caramel stayed calm. That's progress you can't measure on a chart." Marisol smiled back, relief washing over her. She realized the demonstration had become more than a simple showcase. It was a testament to the profound bond that had grown between horse and girl. After they loaded Caramel for the trip home, Marisol's father patted her shoulder. He admitted he'd been unsure about taking the mare to a public event, worried it could stir up Caramel's anxieties. But seeing her cope well changed his perspective. "I'm proud of you both," he said softly, starting the engine. Marisol peered through the trailer window, watching Caramel stand steady despite the ride. Once back at the ranch, Marisol led Caramel to her stall, removing the travel wraps with careful hands. The mare breathed out slowly, as if releasing the tension she'd held onto during the event. Marisol could feel Caramel's relief through her fingertips. Despite the day, the horse was energized, as though she had conquered something within herself by facing the public without crumbling under fear. That night, after ensuring Caramel was settled, Marisol stayed awake in her room, replaying the day's events in her mind. She couldn't stop smiling when she remembered the applause. The demonstration had shown her that there were people eager to celebrate a horse's resilience, not just its pedigree. It also reminded her how far Caramel had come from those days of uncertainty and nagging pain. In the following weeks, Caramel's confidence soared. She navigated the cone patterns with ease, and Marisol introduced trot intervals on softer ground. Onlookers still gawked at her short legs, but few scoffed now. The sight of a once struggling horse finding new vitality moved them to pause in admiration. Marisol, never one to boast, took satisfaction in the knowledge that Caramel's spirit was blossoming by day. Thomas continued to stop by, sometimes bringing Rio for a stroll alongside Caramel. Watching the two horses together made Marisol laugh, Rio's long legs contrasting with Caramel's sturdy build. Yet the mare held her own, stepping forward without fear. On one visit, Thomas mentioned an upcoming local show, a casual affair open to all ages. He encouraged Marisol to consider entering the walk-trot category for fun. Marisol hesitated. Part of her dreamed about presenting Caramel in a proper arena, proving that the mare's short legs and scars didn't define her. Yet she worried about the noise, the crowds, the stress of travel. Thomas assured her it was an event, mostly families and novices. "You've got nothing to lose," he insisted. Marisol nodded, heart fluttering at the possibility of achieving another milestone. She spent the next few weeks honing Caramel's walk-trot transitions, always mindful not to push too hard. Each day included slow warm-ups, massage breaks, and plenty of gentle praise. Whenever Caramel trotted more than a few strides without faltering, Marisol's hope expanded. She visualized the upcoming show as a chance not to prove skeptics wrong, but to celebrate the quiet triumph of their unwavering partnership. At last, the day arrived. The showgrounds buzzed with excitement, riders tacking up horses, families snapping photos by decorated stalls. Marisol's parents helped her unload Caramel, who took careful steps onto the grassy lot. Though the mare's eyes shone with alertness, she wasn't trembling. Marisol exhaled in relief, remembering how far they'd come since those early, fearful trailer rides that seemed to rattle Caramel's every nerve. They found a quiet spot to warm up. Marisol guided Caramel through their familiar routine, simple circles at a walk, transitions to a gentle trot, and frequent pauses to rest. Nearby, other riders practiced moves or hopped over low jumps, but Marisol kept her focus on Caramel's comfort. She praised every steady step, ignoring the occasional looks of surprise from those who noted Caramel's unusual proportions. When the walk-trot class was announced, Marisol guided Caramel into the arena. The other entrants ranged from young children on steady ponies to adults on well-trained mounts. An official signaled them to begin, and Marisol nudged Caramel into a brisk walk. She felt the mare's tension, but also her growing trust. Step by step, they circled the ring, Caramel's short legs moving with surprising grace. Then came the signal to trot. Marisol inhaled, giving a gentle cue. Caramel lifted into a measured trot, her head bobbing in concentration. Though they moved slower than the others, they maintained rhythm. Marisol's heart fluttered, remembering the mare's first steps months ago. Now, people on the sidelines watched in respect. This wasn't an injured horse limping through pity, it was a team in harmony. After the final lap, an official asked the riders to line up. Though Marisol hadn't aimed for any prize, her heart pounded as ribbons were handed out. When they called her name for a special recognition award honoring perseverance, she nearly burst into tears. Caramel flicked an ear as the ribbon was gently pinned to Marisol's shirt, as if sensing the significance of their triumph. After the class, Thomas and Rio trotted by to congratulate them. Thomas hopped off his saddle, grinning. "See? I told you this show was the place to start," he said, admiring the ribbon. Marisol nodded, her face flushed with excitement. She realized that while Caramel's journey was far from over, they had crossed a threshold. They were no longer defined by limitations, but by potential. Back home, the euphoria from the show lingered for days. Neighbors who once doubted Caramel now dropped by with congratulations or curious inquiries. Marisol hung the ribbon on a tackboard in the stable. Each time she glimpsed it, she remembered the hush of the arena and the sound of Caramel's trot. She vowed to keep nurturing that spark, aware that pride could become complacency. Determined not to stagnate, Marisol began exploring new possibilities. She researched events geared toward riders with rehabilitated horses, gleaning inspiration from stories of animals once dismissed as hopeless. Caramel, short legs aside, possessed the intelligence that responded to gentle training. Sometimes, Marisol simply led her across the yard to graze, savoring the quiet camaraderie. Those moments reminded her that triumph wasn't always measured in ribbons. Summer neared its peak. Early mornings found Marisol and Caramel working under pastel skies. Evenings ended with a final check on the mare's legs, ensuring no swelling or tenderness lingered. Each day felt like a gift, an unfolding chapter in a story neither had expected. Sometimes Mariam dropped by unannounced, watching with admiration as Caramel executed transitions, a testament to how consistency nurtured lasting change. Late afternoon, Marisol lingered in the paddock as light bathed the fields. Caramel dozed nearby, head lowered in contentment. Reflecting on how a rejected horse with short legs and injuries could transform into a symbol of perseverance, Marisol felt her heart brim with gratitude. The journey would continue, of that she was certain. But for now, she and Caramel stood together, undaunted by past doubts. 2 weeks had passed since the local show, yet the excitement still glimmered in Marisol's eyes whenever she recalled the moment they'd called her name for that special recognition ribbon. Caramel had adapted well to the recent changes, as if stepping into an arena of onlookers had awakened a hidden well of confidence within her. Where she used to carry herself with timid uncertainty, she now ventured around the paddock with a subtle but unmistakable poise. Marisol found herself lingering at the fence some mornings, simply watching Caramel graze, amazed at how this short-legged mare, once hobbled by injuries and fears, could appear so calm and self-possessed in the golden light of sunrise. Their routine remained steady yet flexible, shifting slightly each day to accommodate Caramel's progress. Sometimes, Marisol would raise the height of the cones just an inch, or encourage a longer trot interval when the mare showed no signs of pain. The intense focus of rehabilitation had blossomed into something more, a conversation of trust and mutual discovery. On a clear afternoon, Marisol noticed Caramel willingly pick up a light canter in the paddock, unprompted. It was only a few strides, and her gait was still uneven, but the sight took Marisol's breath away. She found herself choking back tears, reminded of those early days when Caramel struggled to put weight on her injured leg. That evening, Marisol's parents sat with her around the kitchen table, listening intently as she described Caramel's spontaneous canter. Her mother's eyes sparkled with pride, and her father rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "You two have come a long way," he said, "but keep an eye on how she recovers after trying something new." His cautious tone made sense. Though Caramel's spirit had soared, her physical limits might still lag behind. Marisol nodded, determined to protect what they'd achieved by ensuring the mare's energy never outpaced her healing. As word of Caramel's ongoing transformation spread, a few locals began dropping by the paddock after hearing rumors of the miracle mare. While some were genuinely curious, others seemed to be waiting for a sign of failure, perhaps to confirm their early suspicions that no horse with Caramel's challenges could really thrive. Marisol tried not to bristle at the undercurrent of skepticism. Instead, she focused on sharing the facts: Caramel's structured therapy, consistent rest, and abundant patience. Whenever Caramel demonstrated a steady trot or calmly explored new obstacles, Marisol watched the observer's expressions shift from doubt to awe. It was a satisfying reminder that true change takes time, but it can also soften even the most entrenched disbelief. One late afternoon, Thomas visited with a surprise. He brought his friend Alejandra, a soft-spoken rider who had recently placed well in a statewide equestrian event. Alejandra had heard about Caramel and wanted to see if there was any chance the mare could handle a more advanced training style once fully recovered. Marisol felt both intrigued and protective. She wanted Caramel's horizons to expand, but worried about anyone pushing her horse beyond safe limits. Alejandra, sensing Marisol's concern, reassured her. "I'm not here to take over," she said quietly, stroking Caramel's neck. "I'm only curious if, one day, she might enjoy learning something like dressage. It's very controlled, with a lot of emphasis on balance. It could be good for a horse with leg issues, as long as the training is gentle." Marisol mulled over the idea. She'd never pictured Caramel performing elaborate maneuvers. Yet the notion that there could be another path, a style focusing on precision and grace, felt oddly appealing. She promised Alejandra she would consider it after consulting Mariam and Dr. Salinas. In the meantime, Marisol kept her sights on smaller goals. She practiced loading Caramel into the trailer and taking brief drives around the neighborhood, ensuring the mare didn't regress into the anxious state that once plagued her. After each short trip, Marisol would reward Caramel with thorough grooming sessions, brushing her coat until it gleamed. She took pride in how the once scraggly mane had grown shinier and healthier under her care. It might seem trivial to some, but for Marisol, every strand of improved hair symbolized perseverance in the face of adversity. Then came a setback. One humid morning, Marisol woke to find Caramel standing in the paddock with her head lowered, favoring her injured leg more than she had in months. Alarmed, Marisol brought her inside and carefully examined the limb. The area around the old scar felt warm to the touch, a subtle swelling that made Caramel twitch when pressed. Marisol's stomach knotted with fear. She dialed Dr. Salinas immediately, voice trembling as she described the symptoms. The vet agreed to come by that evening. All day, Marisol hovered by Caramel's side, applying cool compresses and speaking in soothing tones. She dreaded the idea that their steady climb toward recovery might collapse. When Dr. Salinas arrived, he performed a thorough exam, probing gently around the leg and checking Caramel's overall condition. At last, he exhaled and gave Marisol a faint smile. "It seems like a mild flare-up," he said. "Could be a response to the humidity or a minor strain. Let's get her on a short course of anti-inflammatories and scale back the exercise until the swelling subsides." Marisol felt her eyes burn with relief. She clung to the vet's instructions, determined to do everything right. Over the next week, Caramel's activities were limited to slow walks on soft ground. Marisol apologized to the mare in hushed tones, promising they would return to more exciting training once she was healed. Caramel offered no protest, moving as gingerly as she had in the early days. Though the setback unnerved Marisol, it served as a stark reminder of how precarious their progress still was. Healing, she realized, was never a straight line. Gradually, the swelling receded, and Caramel's limp lessened. Dr. Salinas revisited, confirming the horse could resume some moderate exercises. "Just remain cautious," he advised. "Each time she pushes herself, keep an eye out for similar flare-ups." Marisol nodded, grateful they'd escaped a more serious complication. The scare taught her to cherish every successful trot or canter as an achievement rather than a guarantee. As Caramel returned to her normal routine, Marisol reflected on Alejandra's suggestion about dressage. Curious, she spent late nights watching videos of gentle dressage training, absorbing how it emphasized subtle communication between rider and horse. She found herself enraptured by the idea of forging an even deeper bond through controlled movements that showcased cooperation rather than force. Gathering courage, she messaged Alejandra for advice on how to begin safely given Caramel's leg history. Alejandra replied with a list of basic exercises that could improve balance without straining a recovering limb. One of these exercises involved practicing turn on the forehand, a slow pivot that encouraged a horse to cross its hind legs smoothly. Intrigued, Marisol tried it with Caramel one balmy afternoon. She wrapped a loose band around the mare's hindquarters for support, just like Mariam had once shown her. With a soft cluck of her tongue, Marisol guided Caramel's head to one side while applying gentle pressure at her flank. Caramel hesitated, confusion evident in her ears and eyes. Yet after a few attempts, she shifted her weight just enough for a slight pivot. It was clumsy but promising. Marisol grinned, praising the mare lavishly as though she'd performed a perfect pirouette. Each time Caramel tried, she understood a bit more, crossing her hind legs in a manner that surprised even Marisol. Though the motion was small, it felt like unlocking a hidden door. Caramel, who had once struggled merely to stand without pain, was learning a delicate move that demanded grace and focus. The novelty of this achievement left Marisol more inspired than ever. When Alejandra visited to check on their progress, she commended Marisol's patience. "You're not rushing her," she observed, nodding in approval. "That's exactly what a horse like Caramel needs." She offered a few fine-tuning tips, adjusting Marisol's hand placement and refining the signals to reduce any confusion. Caramel, for her part, seemed to enjoy the puzzle-like nature of these moves. After each short session, her eyes shone with a quiet alertness, as if she took pride in accomplishing something new without hurting herself. Mariam remained a steady presence in the background. Though her visits were now spaced further apart, she monitored Caramel's muscle tone and alignment, ensuring the dressage-style exercises weren't aggravating old injuries. "You've found a lovely balance," she remarked during one checkup. "Caramel is building strength through these controlled movements, and her leg is holding up under the new challenges." Marisol practically glowed at the compliment. She felt a surge of gratitude toward everyone who had helped them reach this point: Mariam, Dr. Salinas, her own parents, and even Thomas and Alejandra. It was a community effort bound by a shared belief in Caramel's potential. Summer's warmth gradually began to fade into the crispness of early autumn, and Marisol saw new possibilities taking shape. The local equestrian center announced a low-key dressage clinic open to horses of all levels, promising a calm environment focused on teaching, not competition. Alejandra urged Marisol to attend, claiming the feedback from professional trainers could be invaluable. Marisol hesitated, recalling how Caramel struggled in new settings at first, but she also remembered how well the mare handled the demonstration event and the local show. Perhaps with measured steps, Caramel could learn to adapt again. After some deliberation, Marisol signed up for the clinic. She knew they wouldn't be practicing high-level maneuvers, but the chance to expose Caramel to new elements, mirrors in the arena, refined instructions from experts, and the presence of unfamiliar horses seemed like the next logical step. Each day, she reviewed the pivot exercises, the gentle lateral movements, and the balanced walk-trot transitions. Caramel occasionally showed residual stiffness in her leg, but it never reached the point of another flare-up. Marisol made sure to keep sessions short and always ended on a positive note. The crisp morning of the clinic arrived faster than she anticipated. Marisol loaded Caramel into the trailer before dawn, offering reassuring pats and soft words. During the drive, she stole glances at the mare through the window. Though Caramel's ears flicked nervously, she stood relatively calm. Pulling into the equestrian center's lot, Marisol's pulse quickened at the sight of elegantly dressed riders and their sleek horses. She parked in a far corner, wishing to ease Caramel into the scene at a controlled pace. Unloading Caramel, she allowed the mare to survey the surroundings. Large indoor arenas loomed before them, with well-groomed outdoor rings bustling with morning sun. Caramel snorted, stepping forward with tentative curiosity. Marisol led her around, letting her sniff the fence rails and watch other horses practicing. Gradually, the mare's posture relaxed. With Alejandra's guidance, Marisol joined a small group in the beginner lane of the clinic. While most of the horses were more traditionally built for dressage, no one seemed to look down on Caramel's short legs or her history of injury. Instead, the instructors gave gentle nods and offered supportive smiles as if they recognized her as a work in progress. When their turn came to ride a short pattern, Marisol tensed. She had prepared by lightly backing Caramel at home a few times, ensuring the mare could bear a rider's weight in careful increments. Still, the environment was new. She placed a soft saddle on Caramel's back, fastening the girth with slow, methodical movements. Caramel stayed calm, which emboldened Marisol to mount carefully, settling her weight with minimal pressure. Heart-pounding, she guided Caramel into a walk, weaving around a row of markers set out to test steering and rhythm. The instructor watched, offering calm instructions. Keep your legs soft. Let her find her balance. She's doing well. Caramel's ears tilted back at Marisol's voice, but she pressed onward, her uneven gait smoothing with each step. A small crowd gathered at the arena's edge, drawn by curiosity about the horse with the short, scarred legs. Marisol could feel eyes on them, but focused on Caramel's breathing, the subtle rise and fall that signaled how the mare was holding up. Then she asked for a gentle turn on the forehand, just as they had practiced. Caramel pivoted, a little awkwardly but willing. Someone in the crowd clapped softly. Marisol grinned, tears threatening to cloud her vision. They ended the exercise with a relaxed trot down the long side of the arena. The instructor nodded approvingly. She's responding beautifully to your signals. Keep building that trust, and you'll see more fluidity over time. Marisol dismounted slowly, patting Caramel's neck. The mare stood, alert yet composed, as though sharing in the satisfaction of completing something new. Stepping out of the arena, Marisol realized that her dreams for Caramel had evolved. It was no longer a question of whether the mare could merely survive her injuries, but whether she could excel in a way no one had expected. Each new challenge felt like a door opening, revealing rooms filled with possibilities they hadn't even considered. Watching Caramel stand tall under the autumn sun, Marisol felt that unbreakable bond stretch and strengthen, whispering that this was only the beginning of yet another surprising chapter in their shared story. The clinic was an eye-opening experience, revealing both how far Caramel had come and how many new doors were opening for her. After their beginner dressage session, the instructors took time to discuss gentle training methods, focusing on ways to preserve Caramel's well-being while refining her balance and responsiveness. Marisol, still flushed with pride from their successful pivot and trot, eagerly soaked up every hint and tip. She learned about subtle weight shifts in the saddle, the importance of releasing tension in her own shoulders, and how a soft rein contact could encourage Caramel to stretch forward without fear. Even though they practiced only basic movements, each exercise felt like a tangible step in Caramel's ongoing transformation. When the day ended, Marisol loaded the mare back into the trailer with a buoyant heart, determined to incorporate everything she had learned into their daily routine at home. Over the following weeks, the crisp autumn air provided an ideal environment for training. Early mornings found Marisol by Caramel's side in the paddock, dew still clinging to the grass as they went through warm-up stretches. The mare's short legs now moved with a confidence that was almost startling, given the memory of her limping, insecure gait months earlier. Marisol introduced small variations in their routine: figure eights at a walk, gentle lateral work along the fence, and once Caramel felt comfortable, a few trot strides interspersed with transitions back to a walk. Each day, Caramel's strides seemed incrementally smoother, her angles more balanced. While she would never have the elegant proportions of a classic dressage horse, her determination and gentle spirit shone through every effort. More than once, Marisol had to wipe away tears of pride after a successful session. Outside their cozy world, people began to speak more openly of Caramel's story as an inspiration, a symbol of persistence that resonated beyond the typical riding circles. A local newspaper columnist got wind of the mare's journey and approached Marisol for an interview. Nervous but hopeful, Marisol agreed, wanting others to see how an overlooked horse could triumph with enough patience and care. They met by the paddock, where Caramel quietly nibbled on fresh hay as the journalist fired off questions about her injuries, the therapeutic exercises, and the bond that had formed between horse and girl. By the time Marisol finished describing Caramel's earliest struggles and the slow, steady climb toward health, the reporter looked visibly moved. A photographer snapped pictures of Caramel ambling around the paddock, capturing that subtle spark in her eyes. Marisol couldn't wait to share the final article with everyone who had supported them. Within days of the interview's publication, well-wishers reached out through letters and emails, commending Marisol's dedication. A few included stories of their own rescue animals, forging a sense of kinship that reassured Marisol she wasn't alone in her quest. She pinned these notes on a corkboard in her bedroom, a testament to how one horse's revival could touch the hearts of many. The encouragement fueled her, reminding her to stay humble and cautious. Any horse with old injuries could relapse if pushed too hard. She often paused to recall Dr. Salinas' warning that Caramel's leg might always require special attention. But the outpouring of support helped her trust in the path they were forging. Then, as autumn leaves flamed into gold and scarlet, Mariam stopped by for what was supposed to be a routine check. She watched Marisol guide Caramel through a series of walk-trot transitions, her keen eyes tracking every shift in the mare's posture. Afterward, she examined Caramel's leg, running her hand gently over the scars and tendons. "She's made remarkable progress," Mariam murmured, straightening with a thoughtful expression. "I'd have never imagined this horse would move so freely, let alone show an aptitude for dressage work." Marisol's heart soared at the praise, but she reminded herself not to take any of it for granted. Mariam then offered a cautionary note. "Always stay attuned to her comfort level. If she shows any sign of stress or pain, back off immediately." Marisol nodded, fully aware that a single misstep could undo months of labor. Shortly after Mariam's visit, Alejandra returned with new suggestions, demonstrating how to refine Caramel's turn on the forehand into a softer, near-seamless motion. Alejandra also introduced exercises at the halt, teaching Caramel to remain relaxed and attentive until given a clear signal to move. While these details might seem small, they built the foundation for more advanced maneuvers. Marisol was amazed at how Caramel responded to gentle half-halts and soft leg pressure, as though delighted to learn each new cue. Whenever the mare executed a smooth pivot or an unbroken halt, Marisol rewarded her with a scratch behind the ears and a whispered "good girl," which never failed to make Caramel's ears flick forward in anticipation. Emboldened by these developments, Marisol began contemplating whether to enter another low-level dressage exhibition. Some local stables held casual events in the fall, drawing novice riders eager to practice in a friendly atmosphere. This time, Marisol didn't quake with uncertainty. Caramel was showing no signs of discomfort, and her movements were steady enough to handle a short test in an arena. One evening, Marisol mentioned her plan to her parents over dinner, bracing for potential concerns. Instead, they both smiled. Her father offered to help transport Caramel, and her mother agreed to film the performance so Marisol could analyze the footage later. Their support felt like a gentle wind at her back. The event took place on a bright Saturday, leaves swirling on a mild breeze that whispered of the changing season. Caramel loaded into the trailer without fuss, calm but curious. Upon arriving, Marisol realized she felt more excitement than fear. She guided Caramel into a warm-up ring, letting her adjust to the new surroundings. Riders of all ages trotted around, some looking polished and others admittedly nervous. Yet the atmosphere was welcoming, with many participants stopping by to compliment Caramel's unique look. By now, Marisol was used to the occasional double take at the mare's short legs, but the difference was that Caramel carried herself with a subtle dignity that defied the initial impression of fragility. The test itself was straightforward, a walk-trot pattern with a few transitions and a chance to demonstrate basic control. Marisol rode Caramel into the arena, feeling the mare's energy humming beneath the saddle. The judge, a middle-aged woman with a kindly expression, nodded as they entered. Marisol took a deep breath and guided Caramel forward. Each stride felt measured, as if Caramel understood she needed to conserve her energy and maintain a steady rhythm. They performed a circle at a walk, then eased into a trot along the rail. Though their pace was modest, Caramel's steps were balanced, head bobbing lightly in time with Marisol's rising. The turn on the forehand came next, a maneuver they had practiced meticulously. Caramel responded beautifully, crossing her hind legs with only a small hitch. Marisol bit her lip to keep from grinning too broadly. When the test concluded, Marisol halted Caramel in the center of the arena and saluted the judge. Applause trickled in from the small crowd. The judge offered a few comments on clarity of aids and suggested more suppleness in transitions, but then added how impressed she was by Caramel's calm demeanor. "You've done a splendid job making her comfortable with these movements," she remarked. Marisol felt tears prick her eyes, a familiar wave of gratitude washing over her. Whether they placed first or last didn't matter. Caramel had navigated an official dressage test without the faintest hint of a limp. After the competition, they lingered by the trailer, talking with other riders who wanted to meet Caramel up close. One teenage girl, her own horse resting nearby, admitted to Marisol that she'd almost given up on her mare after a string of injuries. Seeing Caramel's progress, she said, reignited her determination. Marisol nodded, recalling all the nights she'd felt overwhelmed by doubts. Perhaps sharing their story offered hope in ways she'd never anticipated. Eventually, they returned home to the ranch, tired but exhilarated. That evening, Marisol sat in the stable with Caramel, brushing out tangles in her mane. A light wind carried the scent of hay, and Marisol could hear distant crickets chirping. She felt that the day's achievements, though small on paper, resonated as deeply as any grand trophy. Caramel had performed with steady confidence in a setting that once might have terrified her. Gently, Marisol pressed her forehead against the mare's neck. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered. Caramel exhaled, warm breath rustling Marisol's hair. They stayed like that for a long minute, girl and horse, the bright overhead bulb casting a soft glow in a stable that felt worlds away from the darkness of the past. In the days that followed, Marisol wound down the training to let Caramel rest and digest the experience. She also studied the video her mother had taken, noticing tiny details like the angle of Caramel's head or a moment of hesitation before a trot transition. It became clear how each piece of feedback from instructors dovetailed with the reality she saw on screen. More than ever, Marisol understood that while Caramel had come a remarkable distance, there was always another layer of refinement or caution to explore. As October drew near, a crispness settled into the mornings. The ranch fields turned shades of amber and brown, leaves swirling across the paddock like confetti. Marisol dug out a slightly thicker blanket for Caramel to wear at night, mindful that the mare's old scars might ache more in cold weather. The shift in temperature underscored how fluid their journey had become. Each season brought changes, both in the environment and in Caramel's evolving capabilities. One late afternoon, as the sun dipped below the horizon in a blaze of orange, Thomas arrived with a proposition. He suggested they organize a small fundraiser at the ranch, inviting local horse enthusiasts to watch demonstrations by rehabilitated or rescued horses. The proceeds, he explained, could go toward a rescue organization or to help offset Mariam's time donating therapy sessions to those who couldn't afford them. Marisol's eyes lit up. She imagined Caramel being part of a demonstration that showed newcomers just how far a neglected or doubted horse could go. Her parents endorsed the idea wholeheartedly, offering to help with refreshments and space. Mariam agreed to speak about therapy techniques, and Alejandra volunteered to demonstrate basic dressage moves. They set a tentative date for mid-autumn, giving them enough time to prepare. Marisol felt a tingling excitement at the chance to share Caramel's story in a live format, rather than a written article or fleeting conversation. Maybe Caramel's tale of quiet perseverance could galvanize broader support for horses like her. After all, the mare had already surprised everyone who once dismissed her as nothing more than a broken, short-legged oddity. Late that evening, after the plans were sketched out, Marisol wandered into the stable one more time. Caramel stood half asleep in the warm glow of a lantern, straw rustling under her hooves. Marisol placed a hand on the mare's mane, feeling the slow, rhythmic pulse of a being who had battled pain and fear, yet still dared to trust. She realized that no matter how many events they entered or how many people lauded Caramel's progress, the real reward lay in the shared moments of soft silence. It was in that intimate space, free from external judgment, that their bond had flourished. And so Marisol whispered, "Thank you," uncertain if Caramel understood the words, but certain the mare felt the tenderness behind them. Mid-autumn arrived with a swirl of crisp breezes, the leaves overhead shifting to fiery hues of red, orange, and gold. In the days leading up to the fundraiser, Marisol's home buzzed with low-key excitement. She and her parents spent evenings finalizing the setup, a small stage for speakers, simple seating for spectators, and an area in the paddock where horses could demonstrate their training. Mariam agreed to deliver a short talk on equine rehabilitation, while Alejandra planned a dressage exhibition on Rio to illustrate the more advanced possibilities for a well-recovered horse. Meanwhile, Marisol carefully prepared Caramel for her role, hoping the mare's story would shine as brightly in person as it did in newsprint. Thomas pitched in by hanging flyers around town, handing them to anyone who so much as glanced his way. More than once, he returned with a grin, reporting that local businesses had agreed to sponsor refreshments or donate modest prizes for a small raffle. "People really want to support this cause," he told Marisol one afternoon, leaning over the fence where Caramel nibbled at a patch of clover. "It's like you've shown them there's a reason to believe in second chances." She blushed, feeling an odd mixture of pride and humility. Each new sign-up or sponsorship underscored just how much attention Caramel's journey had garnered, more, perhaps, than Marisol had ever anticipated. Preparations sped along, and soon the day of the fundraiser dawned bright and clear. Even before sunrise, Marisol and her parents were outside, setting up folding tables and chairs. A gentle breeze sent fallen leaves dancing across the driveway as people began to arrive. From neighbors who'd followed Caramel's progress to a handful of equestrians curious to see the rescued horses. Mariam arrived early, giving the paddock one last inspection to ensure the ground was safe for demonstrations. Alejandra drove up next, horse trailer in tow, with Rio snorting inside at the unfamiliar scents. By mid-morning, cars lined the dirt road leading to the ranch. Families with children strolled in, and older riders who'd known Marisol as a shy girl looked around with interest. A few recognized Caramel instantly, pointing and whispering about the mare's short legs and scars. Marisol tried to remain calm, reminding herself that this event was meant to educate and inspire, not to put Caramel on trial. She could feel her pulse quicken each time someone approached the fence. Every curious gaze carried the possibility of judgment, yet also the promise of empathy and understanding. When the clock struck noon, Tomas took the small stage they'd erected near the barn to welcome everyone. He introduced the idea behind the fundraiser, raising awareness and supporting local rescue initiatives. A light round of applause rippled through the crowd. Then he handed the microphone to Mariam, who stood with poised confidence, ready to speak about therapeutic methods. She described how specialized exercises and steady patience could mend more than just physical ailments in a horse, weaving in anecdotes of Caramel's early struggles. Hearing the mare's name called out before so many people made Marisol's cheeks flush. She could see Caramel in her paddock, head lifted as though sensing the gathered crowd's energy. Once Mariam finished, Alejandra and Rio performed a short dressage routine. The horse's muscles rippled beneath a glossy coat as Alejandra guided him through circles, transitions, and half-passes that seemed effortless. Applause erupted when Rio executed a graceful trot extension, hooves skimming the ground in fluid arcs. Marisol watched from the paddock fence with Caramel, feeling both admiration and a pang of nerves. She knew their own demonstration wouldn't be nearly as polished, but it also wasn't meant to be. The point was to show how a horse once labeled broken could regain strength and confidence, even if her steps were measured rather than flashy. Soon, it was Marisol's turn. Heart thudding in her chest, she led Caramel toward the center of the paddock, where a loose crowd had gathered behind a fence. Her mother carried a portable microphone, offering it to Marisol with a reassuring smile. Clearing her throat, Marisol began to speak, her voice wavering at first. She introduced Caramel, recounting how she'd found the mare at a ranch where nobody believed in her. She mentioned the injuries, the short legs, the months of therapy, and the unwavering support from friends and family. As she spoke, Caramel stood beside her, ears flicking curiously at the hushed audience. Then Marisol demonstrated the gentle exercises they'd practiced, a series of slow turns and stretches, moving Caramel in a small circle. People leaned forward, observing the mare's gait. Though her legs were clearly shorter than most horses, the steps were free of the pronounced limp that once haunted her past. Marisol emphasized how fundamental trust had been, explaining that Caramel's healing wasn't solely physical, it was emotional too, rooted in consistent kindness. She walked Caramel to one end of the paddock, where they practiced a turn on the forehand, prompting a few murmurs of appreciation. It wasn't as crisp as a well-trained dressage horse might manage, but it carried the unmistakable air of progress. A smattering of applause followed each movement, gentle encouragement for a horse that still carried residual scars. Marisol felt tears prick at her eyes. She thanked the onlookers and made sure to highlight the local rescue organization the fundraiser aimed to support. Finally, she concluded by guiding Caramel into a light trot around the perimeter. The mare's ears stayed alert, and although the steps weren't perfectly even, her head remained high, a quiet statement of resilience. When they came to a stop, the crowd offered a warm, respectful round of applause. Afterward, people approached with questions, some wanting to pet Caramel, others sharing their own horse-related stories. An older man whose weathered hands bore the marks of a life spent around barns told Marisol he'd once owned a horse, abandoned for similar reasons. He admitted he hadn't known how to rehabilitate it. Seeing Caramel, he said, made him realize how he might have done things differently. A tear glistened in the corner of his eye. Meanwhile, a mother and her daughter asked if they could snap a picture with Caramel, saying they'd been inspired by the newspaper article. Marisol obliged, leading the mare to the fence so the girl could gently stroke Caramel's mane. By mid-afternoon, the event hit its stride. Raffle tickets were sold for small prizes, and light snacks were served near the barn entrance. Tomas manned a table filled with brochures about rescue and rehabilitation facilities, while Mariam answered questions on everything from feeding regimens to recommended vet visits. Marisol, still floating on the adrenaline of her presentation, found herself fielding inquiries about Caramel's daily therapy routine. She explained the slow walks, the balanced transitions, and the unwavering focus on comfort. Each explanation felt like a small ripple of awareness spreading across the group. Throughout the day, Caramel remained calm. Marisol let her stand quietly in a shaded section of the paddock when she wasn't on display, offering the mare occasional breaks from the bustling crowd. At one point, a gust of wind caught a tent flap nearby, causing a loud snap that made a few horses spook. Caramel's muscles tensed, but she didn't bolt. Marisol soothed her with a steady hand on the neck, and the mare relaxed again. In that moment, Marisol felt an overwhelming sense of awe at how a horse once plagued by chronic anxiety had learned to trust her enough to stay grounded. By late afternoon, the sun began its descent, bathing the ranch in a warm, golden glow. People started to trickle out, expressing gratitude for the informative and uplifting day. Many dropped donations into a large jar labeled "Supporting Second Chances," leaving encouraging notes alongside folded bills. Mariam tallied up the contributions, smiling broadly at how the community had rallied around these stories of healing. Alejandra and Rio packed up, promising to return soon for more joint practice sessions with Caramel. The entire ranch felt lighter, as though everyone had inhaled a breath of hope. When the last car pulled away, Marisol's parents helped her gather leftover flyers and fold up the chairs. Her mother's face shone with pride, while her father quietly commended how poised she'd been in front of a crowd. "You and Caramel inspired people today," he said simply, giving her shoulder a gentle squeeze. Marisol nodded, exhaustion settling in now that the excitement was winding down. She wondered if Caramel felt the same fatigue, having welcomed so many strangers into her space. True to her instincts, Marisol decided to end the day with a calm, grounding ritual. She led Caramel back into the stable, away from the lingering noise of cleanup. The mare's ears flicked, still attuned to the distant echoes of conversation, but her steps carried no trace of panic. Marisol brushed her slowly, removing any dust or bits of straw, humming a soft tune under her breath. The rhythmic sound of bristles through Caramel's coat seemed to lower the tension in the stable aisle. Outside, the last rays of the sun draped everything in amber light, and Marisol felt an almost tangible gratitude emanating from her horse. As evening settled in, she walked Caramel to the paddock for a final turn under the dusky sky. The air held the faint scent of spent leaves, an autumnal hush blanketing the fields. Caramel ambled forward, each hoofstep steady, while Marisol trailed a hand along the mare's flank. She thought about how this useless horse had become a symbol of hope, not just to her, but to an entire community. The day's success wasn't measured in trophies or rosettes, but in the bright faces and heartfelt stories shared. In her mind, that was worth every hour of labor and worry. Thomas emerged from behind the barn, tipping his hat in greeting. "I think we pulled off something special," he said, voice laced with satisfaction. "You should have seen some of the donations people left, enough to make a real difference for other horses." Marisol's eyes widened, and she nodded, brushing a stray hair from her cheek. "I'm just glad Caramel stayed calm," she replied. "She seemed to handle everything better than I expected," Thomas chuckled. "Give yourself some credit, too. She trusts you." Nightfall finally descended, a soft cloak of stars blanketing the ranch. Marisol made sure Caramel had fresh water and an extra flake of hay before closing the stable door. Then she lingered for a moment, hand resting on the warm wood. Beyond it, she could hear Caramel shifting in the straw, a gentle rustle that reminded her of how far they'd come. The glow of the porch light illuminated the chairs they still needed to fold, but she felt no rush. The day had ended on a triumphant note, and she could almost sense the contented energy hanging in the air. Tomorrow, they would resume their routine, careful walks, mindful stretching, perhaps a few new exercises gleaned from the day's many conversations. But for now, all was still, and Marisol allowed herself to savor the quiet. Caramel was safe, calm, and strong. That was more than enough. As she turned to go inside, Marisol paused to gaze at the dark outline of the paddock where earlier the crowd had gathered to watch Caramel. She felt a pang of something deeper than satisfaction, a profound wonder at how an overlooked horse had woven so many hearts together. The fundraiser might have been just one day, but its effects would ripple on, fueling both her and Caramel's journey. With a final, soft exhale, Marisol headed in, mind filled with the comforting thought that whatever lay ahead, they would face it as they always had, together. In the days following the successful fundraiser, life at the ranch slipped back into a comfortable routine. The leaves continued to drift down in reds and golds, carpeting the paddock and crunching softly beneath Caramel's hooves. Each morning, Marisol rose early to check on the mare, running her hands along Caramel's sturdy legs to ensure no lingering soreness existed after all the recent excitement. She felt both grateful and relieved that Caramel's health seemed stable, the old injuries no longer flaring under increased activity. Sometimes she found herself wondering how it was possible that this was the same horse she had discovered, neglected and hurting many months ago. The memory felt almost like a distant dream. Now, Caramel stood tall, short legs notwithstanding, with a quiet confidence that amazed everyone. Spurred by the momentum of the fundraiser, Marisol dove deeper into refining Caramel's dressage basics. Each afternoon, after school, she'd lead the mare into the paddock for a focused session. The crisp air lent Caramel extra energy, and occasionally she'd break into a spirited trot on her own. Marisol responded with a playful laugh, catching up and offering gentle rein cues, turning the impromptu spark into a chance to practice transitions. Whenever Caramel managed a smooth transition from trot to walk, Marisol lavished praise, a pat on the neck, a soft word of encouragement. She could sense the mare's growing pride in each accomplishment. It wasn't that Caramel pranced like a show horse. There was still a slight unevenness to her stride, but the determination pulsing through every step was unmistakable. As autumn progressed, a new challenge emerged. Clouds rolled in, and the nights grew chilly enough that Marisol noticed Caramel seemed stiff some mornings. She recalled Dr. Salinas's caution that cooler temperatures could aggravate old scar tissue. Resolute, she adjusted her schedule, dedicating more time to a slow warm-up before any demanding exercises. Sometimes, that meant leading Caramel in a gentle walk around the yard for 15 or 20 minutes, letting her joints loosen in the cool air. Other times, it meant postponing certain exercises when the mare showed the slightest hesitation. Patience was key, and Marisol guarded it fiercely. She reminded herself that preserving Caramel's comfort mattered more than any training milestone. Meanwhile, letters and emails continued to arrive from people who had attended the fundraiser. Some expressed gratitude for learning about rescue horses, while others inquired about volunteering at local shelters. Marisol felt an unexpected sense of responsibility to keep the conversation alive. She started adding short posts on a community board online, updating folks on Caramel's progress, sharing small insights she gleaned from daily work or tips she'd gathered from Mariam. Over time, the posts gathered a modest following. Strangers asked thoughtful questions about nutrition or recommended new stretches for horses with limited mobility. Each exchange sparked a small ripple of hope, as if Caramel's story had sown seeds of compassion that spread beyond the ranch. Thomas, ever supportive, dropped by on weekends to help Marisol practice. One crisp Saturday, he led Rio into the paddock to let the horses train side by side, hoping Caramel would learn to stay focused even with a large, energetic gelding nearby. At first, Caramel pinned her ears, wary of Rio's playful movements. But after a few minutes, she settled into a steady rhythm, trotting when Marisol cued and halting with minimal fuss. Thomas grinned from atop Rio. "She's got more confidence than half the horses I've seen in my riding club," he remarked. Marisol beamed, remembering how Caramel once trembled at the smallest noise. Occasionally, she found it surreal that the mare who used to flinch away from passing strangers now moved easily alongside a bigger horse without fear. With each passing day, Marisol became more comfortable riding Caramel at a gentle trot. Though she still used a lighter saddle and limited their sessions, it was clear the mare's strength had improved. Mariam checked in often, impressed by the consistency of their progress. She observed that Caramel's back muscles appeared better developed, a sign that the horse had learned to carry herself more correctly. Yet Mariam also stressed caution. "Don't let success tempt you into rushing," she warned. "Rehabilitation isn't just a phase, it's an ongoing commitment." Marisol nodded, determined to keep that truth in mind. Every exercise required mindfulness, every push balanced by the awareness of Caramel's limits. One late afternoon, as Marisol was cooling Caramel down from a light ride, Alejandra arrived with an interesting proposition. She told Marisol about a nearby ranch that hosted small, invitational showcases for riders, working with horses once deemed unfit for mainstream competition. The ranch specialized in offering a platform for underappreciated breeds or horses with unique challenges, celebrating accomplishments rather than ranking them. "It's called the Phoenix Exhibition," Alejandra explained, a wry smile on her lips. "Named for that idea of rising from ashes, you know. I thought it might be perfect for Caramel." Marisol's heart quickened. She'd heard of the event, but only vaguely. It was known for its supportive atmosphere, free of high-stakes pressure or harsh judging. If ever there was a place Caramel could shine without risking re-injury or criticism, this might be it. Still, Marisol hesitated. Entering meant traveling farther than they ever had before, staying overnight so Caramel could rest before and after the exhibition. It also implied performing in a ring she'd never seen, with new sights, smells, and potential triggers. The memory of Caramel's earlier trailer anxiety fluttered in Marisol's mind. She glanced at the mare, who was cooling off in the paddock, tail swishing contentedly. Seeing that calm steadiness reminded her how far they'd come and how carefully they needed to tread. "Let me think about it," she told Alejandra, "and talk to my parents and Dr. Salinas." Alejandra nodded, understanding. "Just keep in mind that this is exactly the kind of place where Caramel's story would inspire others," she added softly. "No one there expects perfection. They want to see heart." After she left, Marisol lingered, gently rubbing Caramel's forehead, torn between excitement and caution. In the end, she decided the risk was worth investigating, if only because Caramel had risen to every challenge so far. The next day, she broached the subject with her parents, who listened thoughtfully. Her mother worried about traveling stress, but her father noted that practice drives had grown easier for Caramel. They all agreed to consult Dr. Salinas and Mariam before making a final decision. Both professionals offered cautious optimism. Dr. Salinas saw no immediate red flags, provided Caramel maintained her current level of comfort, and Marisol kept her sessions moderate. Mariam emphasized that pre-travel prep would be vital, short trailer rides a few times a week, building up Caramel's tolerance. "If she shows any backsliding, reevaluate," she advised. With that green light, Marisol sent off an application to the Phoenix Exhibition, describing Caramel's background and their modest achievements. She felt a flutter in her stomach when she mailed it, uncertain whether they'd even be accepted. Yet a part of her also sensed this was the next logical step in a narrative that had defied expectations at every turn. It didn't take long for the exhibition committee to respond. Within a week, Marisol received an email stating that they were delighted to include Caramel in the upcoming showcase. The event would take place in about a month, giving them ample time to prepare. Marisol's hands shook slightly as she read the message, adrenaline mingling with hope. She shared the news with her parents, and a plan began to form. Together, they arranged for lodging near the host ranch and mapped out how to handle Caramel's care on the road. Thomas offered to come along too, eager to support Marisol and provide any help with hauling or stable chores. The next several weeks flew by in a blur of training, careful rest, and short trailer rides around the county. Caramel handled the practice drives well, stepping into the trailer with minimal hesitation. Each time they returned, Marisol would lead her around the yard, letting the mare realize she was safe at home again. Meanwhile, Mariam dropped in for a final checkup, satisfied that Caramel's joints were holding steady. "Stay attuned to changes in weather," Mariam reminded her. "If the temperature dips drastically, she might need extra warming up before any demonstration, but overall, she looks great." Finally, the day arrived. Marisol loaded up the trailer at dawn, her breath clouding in the chilly morning air. She double-checked Caramel's leg wraps, ensuring nothing was too tight or loose. Her parents packed warm blankets, hay nets, and a first aid kit just in case. Thomas followed in his pickup truck, carrying some additional gear and feed. The drive to the Phoenix exhibition site was longer than any they'd taken before, winding through hilly terrain that showed off autumn's vibrant palette. Whenever Marisol peeked through the trailer window, she saw Caramel standing calmly, ears flicking at the occasional bump. It was a far cry from those early panicked journeys. They arrived in the late afternoon, the sun painting the sky in soft pinks and purples. The ranch hosting the exhibition sprawled across rolling fields, with pens and arenas tucked amid clusters of tall trees. Signs directed them to a check-in area, where a friendly organizer gave Marisol a list of scheduled demonstration times. Their slot was set for mid-morning the next day. Grateful for the timing, Marisol led Caramel to a cozy stable stall, complete with fresh bedding. She spent a good hour ensuring Caramel felt relaxed, walking her around so she could sniff the unfamiliar space and unwind from the trip. When the mare finally settled her head to munch on some hay, Marisol breathed a sigh of relief. That evening, she and her parents drove to a nearby motel, though Marisol found it hard to sleep. Her mind spun with images of the next day's demonstration. She pictured Caramel stepping into an arena filled with spectators who'd come to witness the resilience of horses from all walks of life. She thought of the countless training hours, the ice packs, the short drives, the frustration, and the breakthroughs. Wrapping herself in the motel's quilt, she realized how pivotal this moment felt, like a culmination of every step on a twisting path. Eventually, sheer fatigue claimed her, and she drifted into a dream where Caramel cantered freely under a canopy of autumn leaves. Dawn broke clear and cold. Marisol arrived at the stable to find Caramel awake, ears forward, as though ready for whatever lay ahead. She quickly checked the mare's legs, relieved to find them cool and firm, no sign of swelling. Over breakfast with her parents, they went over the plan, a leisurely warm-up, a calm walk-through of the arena, and then a short demonstration of Caramel's progress. Thomas helped saddle Caramel lightly, adjusting everything for maximum comfort. Mariam wasn't there in person, but she'd sent a text wishing them luck, reminding Marisol to trust her instincts. As spectators began to gather in the main ring for the first round of demonstrations, Marisol led Caramel to the warm-up arena. Other horses milled around, each with its own story of rescue or redemption. One horse had a misshapen hoof but moved with surprising agility. Another bore extensive scarring yet walked with regal composure. Seeing them all standing side by side, Marisol felt a surge of admiration. It was as if each horse wore proof that resilience wasn't a trait reserved for the lucky. It was something nurtured by faith and dedication. Her own demonstration time arrived faster than she expected. Heart hammering, she guided Caramel through a narrow gate and into the main arena. Soft applause greeted them, scattered across the stands. The announcer's voice echoed over the speakers, introducing Caramel as a horse once overlooked for her short legs and injuries, but now on a journey of recovery and trust. A hush settled, and Marisol let Caramel's first steps speak for themselves. The mare sniffed the air, tension in her ears, but her stride remained balanced. Marisol felt her heartbeat slow in time with Caramel's measured walk, a reminder that they were in this moment together. She began with the same exercises Caramel knew best. A careful turn on the forehand, transitions from walk to trot, and a gentle circle around the arena. The mare responded with quiet focus, ears flicking to gauge the crowd's reaction, but never faltering. Though her gait was not as glamorous as some polished dressage horses, it carried a softness that hinted at deep understanding. As they completed the final trot and came to a halt in front of the small audience, Marisol spotted tears in the eyes of a few onlookers. Applause rose, gentle yet heartfelt. She patted Caramel's neck, whispering praise into the mare's ear. They had done it again, taken another step past the boundaries others once placed around them. At the moment the last applause for Caramel's demonstration faded, Marisol felt an overwhelming sense of relief and wonder. She guided the mare out of the arena, letting her catch her breath in the warm-up ring. Dozens of spectators approached, each one eager to share praise or a personal connection to a horse that had once been dismissed. Some people recounted their own experiences with animals that needed a second chance, while others simply offered smiles that radiated admiration. Caramel, for her part, bobbed her head and snorted softly, as if to assure Marisol that she was all right. Though the mare's legs still bore the faintest traces of old scars, her poise made them seem inconsequential. Marisol stroked Caramel's neck, an affectionate gesture that spoke of relief. They had navigated yet another trial without reawakening the pain of past injuries. In that moment, all the hours of careful stretching, slow introductions, and heartfelt devotion felt worth every strain and doubt. Caramel had crossed yet another threshold with quiet, unmistakable grace. After ensuring Caramel was relaxed and calm, Marisol walked her around the stable area, giving the mare a chance to cool down and drink. The Phoenix exhibition grounds buzzed with a shared sense of achievement as rescued and rehabilitated horses milled about with their handlers. A chestnut gelding with a missing eye stood quietly by a fence, receiving gentle strokes from curious children. Nearby, a dapple-gray mare with a twisted hoof demonstrated easy, fluid steps in an open pen, proving that unconventional appearances did not preclude grace. Overhearing fragments of conversation, Marisol caught stories of heartbreak turned to hope, each one echoing Caramel's own uphill battle. She couldn't help feeling an unspoken kinship with these strangers who also believed in miracles forged by patience. The sense of camaraderie made the experience all the more poignant. Nobody here asked about pedigrees or ribbons. Instead, they spoke of compassion, perseverance, and the small triumphs that others might overlook. Marisol exhaled softly, letting that spirit of acceptance fill her heart. That evening, the organizers invited riders and their horses to gather for an informal campfire gathering near the ranch house. Warm light flickered across smiling faces as people settled into lawn chairs, swapping tales of shattered assumptions and newfound faith. Marisol sat cross-legged on a blanket, Caramel tethered nearby with a relaxed stance. She listened, enraptured, as a soft-spoken woman recounted how her once-abused stallion had slowly learned to trust human touch. Another man, his weathered hat pulled low over his brow, described a filly-born lame who now gave riding lessons to children. Each story resonated like an echo of Caramel's path. Trials, tears, and an unwavering belief in the future. The soft crackle of the fire mingled with the distant nicker of horses in their stalls, creating a sense of unity that transcended language. For Marisol, it felt as if they were all part of a collective testament to hope, an unbreakable thread linking horse and rider alike. In the morning, sunlight glimmered on dew-kissed grass as participants took one last chance to showcase their horses. Marisol rose early, checking Caramel's leg for any sign of stiffness. Satisfied that everything felt normal, she led the mare outside to graze in a quiet corner. The distant ring filled with the low murmur of final demonstrations, each horse-owner pair offering a glimpse of their distinctive bond. Some trotted simple patterns, others performed carefully choreographed routines that celebrated a successful rehabilitation. Now that Caramel's official portion was done, Marisol felt free to wander, marveling at the strength radiating from animals once labeled as fragile or hopeless. Each proud canter, every calm halt, testified to the power of gentle persistence. Whenever someone recognized Caramel, they approached with encouraging words or whispered admiration. By midday, the Phoenix exhibition wrapped up, but the effect lingered like an echo in Marisol's heart. She realized that she and Caramel had become part of a tapestry, weaving countless stories of resilience into a single, brilliant narrative. Returning home felt both comforting and surreal. The ranch's familiar paddock and weathered stable walls welcomed Caramel back like an embrace, but the memories of the Phoenix exhibition still shimmered in Marisol's thoughts. She spent the first day letting Caramel rest, offering an extra soft bedding and a leisurely hand-grazing session. Each time the mare flicked an ear or nickered in recognition, Marisol felt a surge of belonging. The supportive messages they'd received at the event continued to trickle in via emails and social media posts, each one reinforcing the notion that Caramel's story had truly touched people far beyond the ranch's fence line. In quiet moments, Marisol recalled the warmth of the campfire, the hush of spectators as Caramel trotted her gentle arcs. Perhaps the greatest triumph was knowing their bond had transcended the personal, becoming a small beacon to others who sought hope for overlooked or wounded creatures. Caramel's journey was no longer just hers, it belonged to everyone who believed in second chances. In the following weeks, autumn yielded to the first hints of winter, and Marisol adjusted Caramel's routine accordingly. She draped a light turnout blanket over the mare at night, mindful that cooler temperatures could aggravate old injuries. Mornings began with a longer warm-up, walking Caramel around the yard as dawn light filtered through skeletal branches. The holiday season approached, bringing a welcome lull in official events, which meant they could focus on maintenance rather than pushing new boundaries. Still, Marisol remained attentive, aware that Caramel thrived on gentle challenges. They integrated simple dressage exercises indoors whenever the sky threatened snow, ensuring Caramel stayed mentally engaged. Visitors occasionally stopped by, curious about the short-legged horse whose story had circulated through local papers and beyond. Marisol welcomed them, proud to show that Caramel was not just a fleeting sensation, but a testament to steady commitment. Each day, mare and rider forged a deeper understanding, one built on reciprocity, calm perseverance, and the memory of obstacles once deemed insurmountable. As winter deepened, Marisol noticed that Caramel had grown comfortable with a life free of high-pressure demands. On afternoons when the wind howled outside, she'd sometimes skip dressage patterns and instead engage the mare with puzzle-like activities, a hanging treat bag, a toy to nudge around the stall. Despite the lull in competitive outings, Marisol remained vigilant about Caramel's physical state. A weekly check by Dr. Salinas confirmed that the mare's leg remained stable, the old injuries managed by careful exercise and proper rest. Occasionally, Marisol would flip through photos of their first meeting, struck by how fragile Caramel once looked. Though scars still traced the mare's coat, they no longer defined her. Instead, she radiated a quiet dignity, a living monument to the power of compassion. Each evening, Marisol gave Caramel a final pat before turning out the stable lights, cherishing the knowledge that each day marked another step forward together. One frosty evening, as snowflakes drifted across the paddock, Marisol stood at the fence and watched Caramel breathe little clouds of warmth into the cold air. Reflecting on their journey, she felt a calm certainty that they had both grown braver, kinder, and stronger. The short-legged horse, once disregarded and in pain, had evolved into a steadfast partner who inspired strangers and friends alike. Though new challenges might lie ahead, moments of soreness or unexpected setbacks, Marisol trusted that their bond would carry them through. Caramel's spirit had proven unbreakable, nurtured by patience and the willingness to listen when others would have dismissed her as hopeless. Together, they had forged a legacy of compassion that transcended any single triumph. With the sky darkening overhead, Marisol whispered a soft promise. No matter how many seasons passed, she and Caramel would continue facing life with the same unwavering faith that had guided them this far, together.